You should be asking yourself, does it work? Does podcast interview marketing work? And more importantly, does it work for you? You see, if anybody tells you it works for everybody, they're lying to you. See, we've been doing this since 2015. So over that 6+ years, we have worked with over 500 clients. We've helped them get on over 20,000 interviews, and we've learned a lot along the way. And that's things that can help you. And one of the things we learned early on was that results came from three things: message, market, and machine. Now, these all multiplied on each other, and the result came from that. So if one was weak, your entire result with podcast interview marketing was going to be weak. So let's dig into these, right? The message. The message is, do you have stories to tell, not just a product to sell? Are you interested in being interesting? Podcast interview are an awful place to sell. But as Rand Fishkin said, the best way to sell something today is not to sell anything, but to earn the respect, awareness, and trust of those who might buy. That's what you're doing on podcast interviews. And that's what we're going to be listening for and talking about on your interview with our team. We're going to look through all of these and say, which ones are you strong in? Which ones could you improve to get better results? So that's message. The next one is market. Market is, do you know exactly who you want to talk to? And do you have a way to help them? Now, machine is your website and your social media. So when I hear you on a podcast interview, I'm going to Google you. I am going to go to your website and check out your social media. If those don't support you as an expert, I don't care how good you do on your podcast interview, it won't convert. Your credibility will be killed if your social media looks like you're in the witness protection plan and your website looks like it was built in Y2K. So that's how to predict success. But does it work for everyone? No. So it doesn't work if you're really focused on transactions versus relationships. So are you on a churn and burn model where people really don't need to know about your company? It's just you're pushing them through a funnel. If I don't have to have a relationship with you, if I don't have to know about the company, if this is just a quick disposable, a commodity, I probably don't have to near you on a podcast interview. Flip side is if you're offering coaching, consulting, a brand that I really invest in, boy, then it's not really so much a service or a product. It's a trust in you. And you're going to have to talk with people and get to know them, or they're going to have to get to know you in order to make that sale. Now, the next one is low lifetime value. So if you're selling pieces of gum, chiclets, whatever the cheap thing is, I don't need to know about the story behind the company, all the rest of that. If it's just a quick transaction, you probably don't need a podcast interview for that. Go for a paid advertising, something like that. The next one is if you're geographically limited. Podcasts reach all areas over all times. So if you're just doing a sale in the 10-mile radius around you, and that's all the people that you can serve, well, podcast interviews aren't good for you. You need something that's very geographically focused. And then finally, you may have the message, market, machine, but you may not be a match for us. Now, we focus on 3 verticals. That's all we do. And it's not necessarily where our clients are, but where our clients' clients are. And this is really how iTunes defines them. Business by far is our biggest one. Faith and Christianity is our second one. And then health, nutrition, and wellness. And we'll be able to go through and talk about the individual ones here and how that applies to you as we're trying to help you define, will podcast marketing work for you? So let's look at some of the clients we've worked with. We've had over 500, so I'm not going to jump through every one here, but just to give you a sense. Now, our first client was a coach, Aaron Walker, life and business coach out of Nashville, Tennessee. He joked around that he was in the witness protection plan and that a hunting dog couldn't find him. So with that, he needed to get out there. He was known in Nashville, but not beyond there. He's got a great voice, tells great stories, but blogs didn't work for him. It felt like a homework assignment, but he loves to talk. So early on, this was back in 2015, started to get him on some podcasts, got him to talk about what makes him different, what he sees from business, from life. And it was amazing. His goal was just to fill some one-on-one spots. Well, that happened really, really fast. So he raised his price on that. And he still got more leads from that, more people that wanted to work with him. So he decided that he would do paid masterminds, a 10-person group that was paying about $500 a month. Well, he kept doing podcast interviews and the leads kept coming. Just recently, he has gone up to 15 paid masterminds with 10 people each. You can do the math on that. Another one, brands use this. Pete Vargas from Advance Your Reach, great guy. I remember when he was speaking at a stadium of 30,000 people and talking with them the night before. And he said, I'm really nervous. And I said, don't worry about it. You have spoken to more people than this on a podcast interview. And he said, yeah, but they weren't looking back on me. That's one of the great things about podcasts. So easy to do. And Pete's a great communicator, and he helps other people be great communicators. And we've helped him launch his product, getting all of the interviews together to go out. We call it a guest storm or a blitz. If you're doing something like a book tour or a product launch, this can be a great way to do it. And, I love what Pete said. He said, you guys did the heavy lifting. You made it easy for me. Pete's a performer. That's what he wanted to do. Another one is this works really well with authors. I mentioned it before, doing a guest storm or a blitz. This is Chris Tuff. Chris wrote a book called The Millennial Whisperer. Now, this book went on to be a Wall Street Journal bestseller, a USA Today bestseller. And part of the way Chris did that is before the book started, about 3 to 4 months before, he started working with us. We started to get him on podcasts that made a difference, podcasts that his ideal listeners, his ideal buyers, his ideal readers were listening to. And then we had those interviews go live pretty much plus or minus a week of the book going live. So all of a sudden the book goes live. There's all this hype about it, and people were buying books, and he hit some great lists on that. Not only did he sell a lot of books, but he got deals from other people that are now doing, Millennial Whisperer for dentists and Millennial Whisperers for other things. He's franchised it. And the company that he works for has started a separate consulting division off the book of The Millennial Whisperer. There was so much interest on it. Exposure brings opportunity. When millions of people hear you on a podcast, you don't know where that's going to lead, but it's always to great places. Another one, Craig Cody. Craig Cody is a CPA, a fractional CFO. I love him because he's like no other CPA out there. He's a retired New York City detective. And he came up to us wanting to diversify his business. And we were able to show him, you do really well with dentists. And Craig now has a podcast based on business with dentists, and he does a lot of work with dentists. He was able to use podcasts to grow his business, also to figure out what markets resonated best. And you got to love accountants. They know their numbers. And Craig publicly talked about at a meeting that he got a 600% return on investment with working from Interview Valet in the first year. And at 2 years, it was 1,200%. And that's discounting the lifetime value of his customers. Craig is a happy customer, has sent us lots more clients. Nathan Hirsch is another one. Nathan started a company called FreeUp, and he just knew that there was a lot of people that he could help. They just didn't know about him. So Nathan got on podcasts. We helped him get on some great podcasts, worked with him on the strategy of what he could do to help move people from being a passive listener to an active visitor and ultimately an engaged lead. And I love this story because about a year ago, Nathan stopped doing podcast interviews for FreeUp because he sold the company. One of the people that heard him on a podcast interview then became a client, ultimately became the person that bought it from them. Speakers can use this too, right? Podcast interviews are virtual stages. And one of our early clients is Carrie Wilkerson. Now, Carrie is known as the Barefoot Executive. And if you ever hear me or Interview Valet described as the fairy godmother of podcast guesting, it was Carrie that gave us that. Anybody else, I might have pushed back on it, but Carrie is such a nice lady. And one of the things that she pointed out was that she just wanted to talk. She didn't want the stress of having to ask. She said, a nice Southern lady doesn't ask. And also, we worked with her to triage when she was asked to be on a podcast. She'd get a lot of people that were just starting on a podcast. Nice people, but not nice customers. And we were able to work with her so that we made sure that the podcast that she said yes to, that was going to be the podcast that would really move the needle for her. Another one, Coach Mark Podolsky. Mark is known as the Land Geek. We've been working with him for over 3 years. He's built up his entire business with podcasts, with podcast interviews. He also has built up his own podcast. You see, he realizes that, big fish don't swim through funnels and whales don't click. People need to trust him. He needs to hear their stories. And he's even started to work where he gets some of his students now on podcasts because they can tell the story. He came out after the first year and gave us a testimonial and said his business, which was already thriving, was up 30% since working with Interview Valet. Christopher Lochhead, he's the one that called my book, Podcast Guest Profits, the Bible of podcast guesting. He's also the one that helped us coin the phrase podcast interview marketing. Now, Christopher, great author, great mind, retired 3 times CMO out in Silicon Valley, but he knew nothing about podcasting. But he knew enough that he wasn't going to start his own podcast cold. He wanted to go on other people's podcasts to get his reps in, to see what he liked, what he didn't like, to grow an audience. And really, the best place to find podcast listeners is listening to podcasts. And that's how Christopher has done it. His podcast, Follow Your Different, is typically in the top 200. He's also got another podcast called Lochhead on Marketing. And he routinely talks about podcast interview marketing and the results that he's gotten from working with Interview Valet. Brands love this, right? Because their business model is such that the value of a customer is so great. And Barbara Turley is one of our great clients. Barbara is a Irish woman that now lives in France and runs a company in the Philippines. She is amazing. It's not just a VA company, it's a outsourced solution. But she realizes that she's got to get that message out there. And she's proven that work is what you do, not where you go. She can do a podcast interview from anywhere. Doesn't matter where here is. And they have grown their business. She has said that the opportunities that have come out of this has been amazing, not only from the business, but the partnerships, the opportunities to speak, the opportunities to be a contributor to some big magazines. We love the Virtual Hub. Another one is Scott Reeves. Scott is a lawyer. Now you say, why would a lawyer be on podcasts? Well, he helps small businesses. And he wanted to do it more than just the businesses around Texas where he was. And he's got customers throughout the entire United States. He's a legal coach there. He's got a different business model, a different view on things. And Scott gets out there and we're able to help him get in front of business people, talk about different pain points. We work with him on different strategies, different offers that he could give, different ways he could promote the interviews afterwards. You see, we're not just a booking service. To me, those are a dime a dozen, and you really don't need help to get on a podcast. Heck, there's 1.2 million. We help people grow their business, grow their brand from podcast interviews. Mentioned before, authors. Sharon Spano, first-time author, wrote a book called The Pursuit of Time and Money. And I love this one because it shows what hard work will do. Sharon started early, probably 5 to 6 months before the book came out. She was working on pre-sales. But you know what? Not only did her book, when it launched, do great things, but she got so much great feedback. She was able to do a podcast from it. She was able to do an online course with it. And before COVID hit, she was actually doing live events. And she's given us numerous testimonials and said it all started with podcast interview marketing and working with Interview Valet that gave her the confidence, the coaching, the strategy to build that strong foundation. You've heard me say it once, and I'll say it over and over. Exposure brings opportunity. We work with some really big brands too. I didn't have the room to put all of the names on here from HubSpot, but there's a reason the orange in our logo is HubSpot orange. You see, what we're doing is basically inbound marketing with podcast interviews. Sam Malakarjanan was just one of 7 HubSpot personalities we've worked with to get them out to talk about different things of the company. Sam wrote a book called How to Sell Better Than Amazon, a great e-commerce mind. He's done some CMO work at various companies, and he is thrilled with podcast interview marketing. You see, he realized as much as automation and funnels and all of that is helpful, he realizes that it's the conversations. It's the conversations that move people. And we have helped HubSpot work with their clients to move people from being a passive listener to an active visitor and ultimately an engaged lead. Our data, over 500 clients on 20,000 interviews, have also proved some new things in digital marketing. Every digital marketer will tell you one call to action. You may have been told that. But the truth is that on podcast interviews, 3 calls to action always convert the best. A small yes, a medium yes, and a heck yes. You see, if you're talking to whales and big fish, remember that whales don't click and big fish don't swim through funnels. They're one conversation away. David C. Baker, another consultant, high-end consultant talking to agency. He's an author. We've worked with him promoting his book, his newest book, and his services out there. And what's interesting is that David, we're not the first company he's worked with, but we're the company that he's promoting because he's seen that we're not better. We're not just a little bit better. We're different. While other people are going to focus on getting you on a podcast, they're booking services. We focus on podcast interview marketing, and that's growing your business, growing your brand through podcasts. Dana Malstaff, another one. Great podcaster, Boss Mom, and then she launched Boss Dad. We started her here in the podcast. And I could go through lots and lots of this. We can talk about this on our call, either with myself or one of the staff here. Another one, Tim Sanders. Tim is a great speaker. He understands the flow. He came to Yahoo along with Mark Cuban, and Tim's written great books like Love is the Killer App, Deal Storm. And he really showed us that before he got paid for that big keynote speaking, he got hired to talk to the executives. And before that, they bought a dozen copies of his book. And before that, somebody bought an Audible copy of his book after hearing him on a podcast interview. There's so many different things you can do. And I just want to wrap it up here with Gavin Zaklinski. So Gavin started a company called Acuity Scheduling. Now, there's a lot of scheduling companies out there, but he got out there and he talked about why he built it and the story behind it. And I don't think it's any coincidence that when Squarespace went to buy a scheduling company, the one they chose was the one that had the most media, the most story, the most brand loyalty with you. See, this is what you can get from podcast interview marketing. Come prepared to the meeting. Come prepared with questions. Come prepared to be honest and transparent. That's what we're going to do with you. We don't want another client. We want another raving fan. And if at the end of that, we feel that we could actually serve you and that you would be a great addition to our mission of personally introducing inspiring thought leaders to millions of ideal people, well, then maybe we can invite you to work with Interview Valet. And if that's the case, I look forward to seeing you on the other side. What's ordinary to you is amazing to other people. And I truly believe that you could help thousands, millions of people right now with your current product or service. There's only one problem. They don't know you exist. You're the best kept secret. Let's change that.